You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
But let's now talk about the freshman class, because Adrian Autry and Alex Line in that State of the Union address, they were obviously very excited about it. Adrian Autry talked about how really the significance of getting Sadiq White, because, this is a North Carolina guy and you're going into their turf and you're somehow able to land a guy who is top 30 in the country here. And you get Kiyan Anthony, Luke Fennell, Aaron Womack round out the class as well. So, Neil, my question for you is this. How much of an impact do you think the freshmen will have right away?
Great question. And so I was just looking it up since we were talking about it, and it looks like right now in the 247 Sports Composite, the high school class is number 9 nationwide. So, that's nice. I think 247 Sports actually just came out with their final 2025 rankings today. I haven't really poked into it too much, but to answer your question, I don't know that I don't see any of the 4 freshmen playing a ton of minutes, but it could change depending on if the upperclassmen aren't cutting the mustard, so to speak, or if someone gets injured. Knock on wood, I don't want that to happen. But like you looked at Elijah Moore this past year, I mean, he got more run for several reasons, but obviously Starling went out for 7 games. So anyway, I'm not saying they're not going to play at all. And obviously Sadiq White is, a top 25, top 30 guy. Ultra athletic, plays way above the rim. Great rebounder, defensive guy. I think obviously still has, he wants, kind of even with Donnie, he'll want to add strength, to his physique. And he's still, I'm saying this and not trying to be disrespectful, I think he's a work in progress on offense, at least in terms of outside, the paint. But yeah, getting him was a big recruiting win. He's from Charlotte. He played this past year at IMG, where Donnie played his senior year as well. And if memory serves correct, I think Brendan Strawn was his lead recruiter, and Sadiq talked in interviews about how Brendan was at all his games and the coaches were always they recruited him really hard. So that was a good recruiting win. Kiyan, he's obviously Melo's son, but he's trying to make his own mark. And I think his top 30 to 35 ranking is deserved. It's not based on the fact that his dad's Carmelo Anthony. He had a good senior year at Long Island Lutheran, and he just lit it up at, the Jordan Brand Classic, one of those, all-star showcases. But again, I just don't know. I don't see him playing a ton just because they do have multiple guards on the roster. And if, you presume that Nate George is the starting point guard and Starling's the 2 guard, I mean, he could 10, 15 minutes. So Luke Fennell is a 4-star, top 125-ish, plays overseas in Australia, plays against pros. I think he's going to be a good player. And Womack averaged 30 points per game and had 2 50-point games and playing in the Milwaukee area. And I'm not saying he played against the toughest competition nationwide, but it's a nice looking class on paper. But to reiterate, I don't see any of them necessarily playing a ton of minutes, but I think they'll all play. I mean, and Autry, he likes to use a larger rotation. I mean, he might pare it down as the season wears on, but I could see, them getting, I don't think any of them are going to start. I don't know. I'm trying to think who out of those 4 would play the most minutes.
Probably Sadiq.
I'm thinking Sadiq, but obviously they do have Donnie, and they both, are play the 4. Maybe they could play the 3 some. I don't know. But yeah, maybe Sadiq. I mean, I think Kiyan will play some, especially if he's shooting well from outside, kind of like we talk about with Elijah Moore. If you bring him in as a shooter and he shoots well, maybe get some run. But I don't know. What do you think? I don't see any of them making a huge, again, unless, knock on wood, there's injuries or just, some other stuff going on.
I'll start off by saying that right now, presently looking at the roster, I think the freshmen are going to have to make a substantial impact in order for this team to make the NCAA tournament.
Fair.
So that's where I'll start off there.
Yeah.
I think Sadiq White is probably going to be the freshman that plays the most, because you look at the guard depth and you look at Kiyan Anthony.
Yeah.
The way you can carve out minutes for him is maybe he gets some of the some looks at the three as well.
Agreed.
But I mean, right now he's behind JJ Starling, and your point guard's Nathan George, who's going to play 35 minutes a night. So
yeah,
I don't know exactly where Kiyan Anthony fits in, at least at the start of the year.
right.
I mean, if he starts playing well off the bench, I mean, all
Sure.
bets are off. But with Sadiq White, you could see a more path to playing time because how good are William Kyle and Ibrahim Soare? How good are they?
So you're thinking maybe Sadiq and or Donnie could play the 5 some?
I think they can play at the same time, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I can kind of see a path for Sadiq White getting more minutes, because if Sadiq is playing crazy off the bench and he's doing well to start, and then you have William Kyle there who might struggle. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's great, maybe he's not. Who knows?
Yeah.
But if he's not playing well to start the year, well, your way to get Sadiq White more playing time is, well, you might need to slide Donnie to the 5, which I know people aren't in love with, but that's the way to really play Sadiq White.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think was it Autry? I think Autry said that he grew another inch, so he's like 6'10", 6'11".
Oh yeah, he did grow another inch.
Yeah, if he's got
the size, he could do it.
He needs more, more bulk, a little bit more bulk. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, hey, listen, those other guys, Soare and Kyle are both 6'9", so 6'11". No, I don't remember any of their weights off the top of my head, but I assume that Kyle and Soare are probably a little bit more bulky. Maybe not.
A little bit more beef.
A little more beef. I mean, not like, Eddie Lampkin beef. I love you, Eddie. Yeah, no, I agree with you about Sadiq. I think he, out of the 4 freshmen, he's, and again, and we'll talk about this, on the next one, but their defense still, I think, is going to be a question mark. And Sadiq is a really good defender. Now, he was a really good defender at the prep level, so obviously we'll see how that translates over. But I could see him getting more minutes also just because of his defensive abilities and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I agree with you.
Absolutely. One final thing here before we wrap this up. So, I do want to check Adrian Autry on one thing. Okay, I want to check him on one thing because I got to be fair. He mentioned in that State of the Union that Luke Fennell, if he was rated, would be a top 25 recruit in the country.
Right.
He just straight up said something along those lines. Maybe I'm paraphrasing a little. Don't want to misquote him, but that's essentially what he said. He's a top 25 guy in the country. Yeah, so you can actually fact check that. Luke Fennell is rated on all the recruiting services out there. And I'm not going to say he's a bad recruiter or anything like that,
sure,
but he's not top 25.
Right.
He is a 4-star recruit on ESPN and I believe on 24/7 Sports, but
right,
he's not a top 100. And some of the other recruiting services have him as a 3-star.
Right.
Having said that, do you think that we're sleeping on him?
I don't know if sleeping is how I'd characterize it. I just think he plays in Australia. So it's just, I think there's a lack of awareness, not by the Syracuse coaching staff, by fans and media or whatever, because he plays overseas. And I think I've seen articles about some of his games. He's had some good games, and I think he's I'm not saying he's going to play a lot this year, but I think he could carve out a nice career. And he can play. He's listed as a point guard some places and as a combo elsewhere. So it sounds like he could play the 1 or the 2. I don't know if we're sleeping on him. I think he could be good. He plays in Australia, but you're right. He's a 4-star in a couple places, top 125, but others he's 3 stars and top 300. But how these rankings go, man. I mean, we pay attention to them. I use them for stories, but I also say a lot of times, take them with the proverbial grain of salt, because rankings don't always pan out. A lower ranked guy could end up being a stud and vice versa. So I think he's going to be a good player. I agree with you. I don't know how much he's going to play this year.
You're right about the rankings. They are not perfect. Having said that, I just have a hard time believing that he would be a top 25 player in the country.
That's a big jump.
Because they're not so – like the stouts, I feel like would know, like, oh, he's in Australia, so we're just going to slap on this tag with him. Like,
Right.
I just don't see how all of a sudden, if he was in America, they would reevaluate him and say he's really top 25. Like, they could be wrong, but I feel like the players. If you're a scout, the guys who are definitively in the top 25 or can have an argument for it. And then you also know the players that have no case. If you want to sit here and try to argue with me that maybe Luke Fennell could be a top 100, yeah, I mean, like, he's not that far off. But to sit here and say top 25 and to sell the fan base on that, I mean, when you're selling top 25 to people, you're selling someone that is going to be a high impact player potentially right away. And I'm not getting my expectations too high for Luke Fennell. And also, they got Nathan George. Like, they got him to play 35 minutes a night anyway. So I don't think they need to rely on him too much to be a top 25 talent in order to make the NCAA tournament. I think it's really going to come down to how good Kiyan Anthony and Sadiq White are right away. If those guys are really good right away, you can kind of start to see the paths for Syracuse to make it. If they're not, if it looks like they need more seasoning, they need more time, well, I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Syracuse.